I think everybody's ready up. Or am I still showing as unready? There we go.
Oh.
Alright guys, here we go. This is going to be a 6-man game, so I am in no way going to be able to observe this properly, but we'll try and do our best. So, we have some water, aluminum, and carbon available immediately. Whoa, PB head
took the spot I knew I wanted.
Yep, PB head goes ahead and grabs up a nice little spot.
Really?
I imagine there was some amount of carbon under him right here, so what he did was he founded, took it immediately by founding on top of it, eliminated that carbon from the map, and just got some decent carbon production attached to his base. He's got good access to power right next to him and a couple geothermals. He's got decent access to things like water and aluminum, so PB, and of course silicon. So PB is going to be all set to move through this game. Cubit is the only other player who has managed to found so far. Another very, very strong player. He's gone ahead and founded expansive. We can see he's taken up some iron and some aluminum. So all of these players just kind of headed into the base resources that they are going to need to go ahead and move through this game. A couple more players managed to go ahead and found scientific. Now the interesting thing about scientific that we're going to go ahead and talk about is they can actually pull resources straight from the ground directly into their production facilities. So, as we can see, Cubit, he's established iron mines so that once he upgrades, he will be able to put down steel mills. The scientific player, however, he is able to just drop steel mills directly on the iron mines and begin collecting steel immediately at HQ level 1. And so that's a really nice advantage that Scientific has. It actually is getting a bit better with this next patch. As you can see, prices are generally much higher. And so being able to jump into this $70 steel immediately at HQ level 1 is really, really nice. Thankfully for Cubit, he has managed to push to HQ level 2. He's going to go ahead and get that steel established for himself right now. PB Head also pushing to HQ level 2. We can see very, very much still the same basic game flow. He establishes his base resources first, his carbon and his aluminum, because he is a scavenger player. And then he heads into water and silicon. Sounds like Soren's having a bit of a bad time. By the way, for anybody who doesn't know, Soren Johnson, the lead developer of this game. So that's why we've got him in and we're talking to him today. Looks like he's having a little bit of trouble getting going on this map. He's got access to some water, some aluminum, some carbon, but he hasn't even managed to put down his water pump yet. And that's a bit of a concern, so we'll have to see how that progresses for him. Game Slayer is another really very strong player who we were looking at earlier. He has a generally good grasp on what this patch does to the game from what I've seen so far compared to most people. So he's gone ahead and he's founded Scientific. I'm a little concerned about these two Scientific players though. As we were speaking of earlier, these hills can kind of get in the way. So what's happened is they both founded in this northeastern corner on this side of these hills. And that allowed them good access to their steel production that they wanted to. It was fairly close to their base, easy to get in and get a hold of and start making use of. However, they're Scientific players. They want good access to a lot of resources on the ground, right? They don't really care about how the power of those tiles. Low tiles are just as good for a Scientific player as high tiles. Did I say Civ Beyond Earth? I don't know if I said that at some point. I'm sorry, Offworld Trading Company, if I said Civ Beyond Earth at this point. That's my mistake. Anyways. So, Scientifics want good access to resources on the ground. They're very far separated from those resources. They're not going to be able to get as much benefit out of their bonus as they would be hoping for. PB already pushing up to HQ level 3. I'm going to go ahead and do some... Nope, that's not going to work. Tell you what, we'll call it good for now. Alright, back to the game. PB's managed to push to HQ level 3, Lely has managed to push to HQ level 3, and Game Slayer has managed to push to HQ level 3. This is what we're talking about with Scientific players. Even though they came down very, very late, because they had such easy access to their steel, they had such easy access to their food, they're able to still kind of push ahead of other players in this game. Not having to pay that water cost on this particular farm, none of the iron costs on this steel, allowed for very easy transitions for these Scientific players. Nanotech has come up as our day 2 auction, and that's very interesting because Nanotech allows you to recover all of the materials you used when you construct a building. So Soren Johnson, he's going to take that over to himself for 24,000. He will now, for the rest of the game, be able to scrap any of his buildings and immediately recover all of the resources that were used to build that building. Makes it much easier to make transitions even when things are getting a little dicey. Occasionally, you can even end up using your buildings as additional resources to maybe push to knock out another player. Very, very useful patent in nanotech. A lot of players highly value that one and like having it on their side. Alright, Gameslayer pushing into the basic water resources. He's got some fuel and oxygen, some food. We can see those are doing quite nicely for him. Very, very valuable resources he's managed to press into. PB Head, on the other hand, he's got some glass like Soren does, which is reasonable. But unfortunately for him, he doesn't pull those resources straight out of the ground, and so it's costing him just a little bit more than it is for our scientific player. Looks as though Cubit has also managed to move into glass, and Hexmage may be just falling behind the curve a little bit, still stuck on HQ level 2, while everyone else is HQ level 3. He can't quite manage to press in. He's going to go for some farms here, but I don't think it's going to quite be enough, considering we already have Gameslayer in 3 farms, and we should likely see other players moving into significant numbers of them before too long. Alright, PB Head really storming ahead of everybody, though. Already on HQ level 4 with a $10 stock price. It's very, very nice for him. He's going to go ahead and move into reactors. Scrapped out his glass, said no thank you to that anymore. Silicon's getting quite expensive, so that's understandable. Silicon required to make glass, of course. And the reactors are still looking very, very nice. Water down at a mere $13. Used to make the oxygen and the fuel, which are up at 130 apiece. So those reactors will be making a significant amount of money. Yeah, there are no armies in this game. Kind of the interesting little detail about this compared to most RTSs. You do have aggressive actions you can take, which we haven't really looked at a whole lot this game, but we can see down in this bottom right-hand corner we have the black market, right? And so in the black market, there are a couple of defensive or growth-based purchases you can make. You can buy a new claim, or you can buy a goon squad, which all kind of work to either expand or protect your empire. However, these middle 5 options are all aggressive actions you can take against your opponent. So for example, PB has a power surge stored up right now. He could, if he wanted to, we can see that he has electrolysis production. So maybe he wants to make sure his electrolysis production is the best electrolysis production by knocking out everybody else's and making sure that he can sell off that fuel at the high price before anybody else can get in there and cause him problems. So he can use this power surge to shut down, let's say, Gameslayer's electrolysis. And that's how you can get aggressive and fight each other in this game that has no armies. As we can see, this has already happened to Cubit. His electrolysis has been power surged at some point. That might have even been by PB, just to try and make sure the rest of the electrolysis on the map will get the benefit and Cubit will be locked out. Pirate auction has happened. This is yet another aggressive action you can take against another player. We don't know for sure which player took pirates.
Oh,
but they went away for 28,000. Soren's apparently still having a bit of a bad time. So Cubit, he's the one who took the pirates. And now Cubit, if he sees a location that he wants to steal from, for example, he could position the pirates near Gameslayer's electrolysis reactors. This will make it so that when Gameslayer's blimps carry his fuel and oxygen back to his base, there's a 50-50 shot for Cubit to take it if he plants the pirates there. Let's see where Cubit planted them. He put them exactly where we thought. He is going to be trying to target down Gameslayer's electrolysis, so he's going to be trying to steal fuel and oxygen from Gameslayer with these blimps. He hasn't managed to catch any yet, which is unfortunate for Cubit, but there's a 50-50 shot every single time a blimp comes through that a pirate is going to steal it until they have stolen 200 resources. Alright. Soren Johnson is the only one who has started getting aggressive in the stock market. We can see that he has defended himself by purchasing up about half of his own stock. This is because he has a large amount of debt. His stock was very cheap. He wanted to raise it by buying up his own stock and make sure he wasn't going to get knocked out of the game quickly. He's also gotten aggressive, though. He's gone ahead and attacked Lely, who also has a bit of a low stock price and doesn't have a whole lot of income coming in. So Lely's going to have a hard time defending himself against Soren's attack if he manages to continue it. Hexmage, managing to recover. He's moving into farms, which is quite nice. Farms, we can see everybody went for that electrolysis quickly. Electrolysis is easy to get into, very simple to establish, and so everybody wanted a piece of it. But what this meant was farms were basically left alone for the most part. I believe we only had Gameslayer's farms online for a very long time, and then Hexmage slowly expanding into them. So now food has gotten very, very high, and people will want to move into farms as fast as they can if they can pull it off. However, it requires glass to build farms, And so it's very difficult to establish that food production. It's going to be very hard for any of our players who haven't already begun building for it or building those farms to go ahead and move into it. So what we expect to see maybe a little bit more than food soon is if players are really thinking ahead, we'll likely see some glass and some steel production come down instead. And that's exactly what we can see coming out of Qubit right now, is he's made glass as a response to the fact that food got high and people tried to move into it because that drove up the glass price in turn. And that's most of the gameplay of Offworld Trading Company right there. Understanding the interactions between all the resources and trying to find your edge somewhere. Trying to figure out some way to take advantage. Wow. We have another patent auction coming out. So this patent is teleportation, which, well, it might sound a little bit powerful, right? Being able to teleport stuff, and honestly, it is one of the most expensive patents in the entire game if you were to acquire it normally. So what this patent does is we saw these blimps coming out and bringing fuel and oxygen over to Gameslayer earlier, and then pirates stole them, and that was kind of unfortunate. What teleportation does is it immediately moves all resources from buildings into your headquarters. Buildings that are separated from your HQ have to send their resources in batches, usually, of about 40 apiece for things like fuel and oxygen, usually about 20 apiece for aluminum and so on and so forth. But if you have access to teleportation, you don't need those blimps anymore. It doesn't take any time to bring your resources in. It's a very, very, very nice patent to have, and we can see once again Soren putting a lot of value on it. He is the one who goes ahead and takes teleportation. Gameslayer, though, he started, we can see Gameslayer has 3 out of Soren's 10 stock. He doesn't have enough money to actually finish out the game yet, but these two are likely going to be locked into a nice little battle from here on out. Kind of their own little micro 1v1 to determine who actually comes out on top between these two, and we can expect these other players to start getting locked into their kind of individual battles fairly soon here. Soren even actually has sold out of the stock he had in other players just so he has additional funds to commit against Gameslayer. Now, Gameslayer and PB Head have both moved into some special buildings, as has Soren's. Soren has the least interesting special building in the game, the Pleasure Dome. It's sitting there, though, and bringing in a nice $310 a second for him. So if we compare that to any of the other tiles on the map, basically, it'll compete with the best of them, right? $310 once you've taken in that power price of debt paid off a second for Soren is very, very nice. And it's really only matched likely by some water pumps at this stage of the game that have good adjacency bonuses, and maybe if somebody had some electronics factories or chem labs down, they could come close. Here we see PB with a nice looking chem lab available, pumping out chems at the cost of just half a fuel and half a carbon a second. What these chemicals do is they're going to be consumed. They can be sold on the market like anything else, right? But they're going to be consumed by these special buildings that PB has built, these engineering labs. They take chemicals to run, but what that's going to do, see if we can select it. Nope, not going to show us. PB is going to use those, here we go, to upgrade his buildings and make it so that they can produce at a better rate. So while the game is about kind of figuring the market out, determining what resources you can buy, what resources you can sell, you know, the very standard, well, buy low, sell high, there are a lot of little manipulations you can do to modify things kind of in your direction. So as we can see, PB has now finished up 3 levels of chem production. So his chem production has actually been doubled, and we can see he's making $400 a second off of these chem labs. So that's fantastic. A nice little move from him, knowing he was going to be consuming chemicals and driving that price up. And that Gameslayer was going to be doing the same thing, consuming chemicals and driving that price up. He moved into the chems, he's upgraded that production, and those are likely going to be some very good tiles for him for a very long time once he has them fully upgraded. A lot more stock nonsense has been going on while we've been looking at the engineering lab. Gameslayer actually had 4 of his stocks purchased by Qubit. So if Soren was successful in this buyout, Qubit would get a nice payout from that. But it also makes it a lot harder for Soren to get the buyout, as now Soren only has 4 of the 10 stocks required. He has to pay an additional fee in order to acquire the rest of these stocks. He's going to have to pay double price for them, and it's going to be very difficult for Soren to push past Gameslayer. We can see that Gameslayer is already at a 62% value toward buying Soren. He has 62, 63, 64% of the cash on hand that he needs in order to complete that buy. Alright, everybody else kind of managing to stay in the game a bit. Nobody else has gotten super aggressive against another player. It seems like Gameslayer is just intent on knocking Soren out of the game, but I don't see anybody else saying, hey, I absolutely want to kill you. Hexmage has made some moves against CW Lely. We can tell that because he has about 4 of Lely's stock purchased up. And you have to kill the player by purchasing up 10 of their stock, right? And so Hexmage is trying to make that work. He's kind of chosen a weaker player to pick on, who maybe was struggling just a little bit, didn't have the cash on hand to defend themselves, has $100,000 of debt, so their stock price is a little bit lower. But it's going to be interesting to see if he can actually manage to pull that off. Soren, not quite dead yet. Gameslayer seems to have stalled out around the 70% mark. If Soren can hold on, he'll maybe be in an okay spot to push back against Gameslayer. My concern is Gameslayer has also had an engineering lab functioning this whole time. He's upgraded some chem production himself. He's making chems somewhere out here, positioned on top of carbon, so he doesn't have to pay the cost as a scientific player. And he's also upgraded some food production. He's working on upgrading oxygen, all kinds of small things like that. However, I kind of have to give the straight advantage in this game to PB. He hasn't gotten aggressive against any other player. He hasn't wanted to commit his money that way. He's purely been investing in himself, but he's managed to make some great investments with these engineering labs. We can see that he's been upgrading electronics production. He has some electronics production established separate from his base. It's already making him about $260 a second per tile. And so it's pretty close to his heavily upgraded chems, and he still has 2 more upgrades remaining in order to complete his electronics upgrading, and he'll be good to go with some very, very solid production when he actually wants to press in and start attacking a player. On top of that, he still has a great player to go after in Hexmage, who still has 7 open stocks available that PB can go into whenever he feels like it. Cubit, on the other hand, is also playing very defensively, but maybe a bit less successfully. We can see that Cubit, he's in electronics production as well, but his electronics production is not as strong as PB heads. He's making as little as $100 per second on each tile for the ones that don't have strong adjacency bonuses, because carbon is very expensive. He doesn't have access to something like carbon scrubbing. He hasn't upgraded them at all from the engineering lab, and so we can see that PB, his electronics, despite the fact that he has less of them, is far more efficient, and every single tile is making significantly more money than Cubit's electronics are. Alright, carbon scrubbing comes out. This is pretty big at this stage of the game. So what carbon scrubbing does, I can't believe we're getting so many patent auctions this game, I actually love it, is carbon scrubbing makes it so that you don't have to actually use carbon when you're making a resource. So these electronics factories, they consume half a carbon per second. All of Cubit's electronics factories so far have been consuming half a carbon a second. And so with carbon up at a good solid price of $126, that's every single second per tile, $64 out of pocket. That isn't happening anymore because Cubit managed to acquire carbon scrubbing. I think there are about 10 patents in the game that are worthwhile, and so they can really change the game up and make the game a bit more complicated. We can see Cubit as well has moved into an engineering lab a bit later than most of the players, but it's a nice idea. He's going to try and get there. Gameslayer still hasn't quite pushed through to that Soren kill, but he's at about 97%. Does not have to push much harder to go ahead and finish it off. I imagine we're going to see Soren as the first player knocked out of this game momentarily. Gameslayer could buy Lely right now. He could get that buyout. That red plus sign means that a buyout is available for Gameslayer, as that's who we're observing right now. That's our red scientific player up here. However, Gameslayer doesn't really want Lely. He doesn't have any of Lely's stock purchased up. He would put a lot of money in Hexmage's hand by going with that purchase, and instead he could knock down Soren, give no money to anybody, and still acquire somebody, and a very valuable player at that. It also knocks the nanotech and the teleportation patents off the game that will no longer be available to any player since Soren acquired them and he has been knocked out. And so those are 2 very strong late game patents that Gameslayer isn't going to have to worry about anybody else having access to. Wow, Gameslayer actually 70% of the way to buying almost anybody he wants to at this point. As we can see, PB Head has to stare at this 71-72% right now. However, PB Head should be very close to a successful buyout on Hexmage. He only has to buy through about 4 of Hexmage's stock. Once he has done that, that will drive his stock price very high, and Gameslayer will no longer be able to execute his buyout. Looks like, unfortunately, Cubit has disconnected. He is now in the hands of a computer player, but that's okay. The computer will take over if a player disconnects. It's just, there is no reconnect function, I don't think.
Ah!
But he's been established in a pretty good spot. Well, we knew that was coming for some time, Soren. It's unfortunate to see you get knocked out first, but yeah, somebody has to go first, right? Soren doesn't want to talk right now, guys, as it turns out, so... But we can hear some furious tapping happening, so I hope you guys are enjoying that. Alright, PB head, I imagine. So what we're looking at... Yeah, I can hear you. What's up?
Okay, cool. Oh man, that was weird. He only had 3 shares of my stock. I just thought he was just stackpiling huge amounts of cash.
Well, he had the engineering... Yeah, I mean, Game Slayer, he's a pretty solid player. He knows how to play this game pretty well.
Yeah, for sure.
And
what was he making his money off of?
Well, a lot of different things. The engineering lab was a pretty big deal. Most of it is that, as a scientific player, you don't have to really switch your resources around too much.
Yeah.
And so... I'm a little surprised he didn't go for slant drilling this game. He could have, and it would have been a nice benefit for him.
Drilling.
Oh, does he have it? Shoot.
Yeah, that was
I missed that
why
happening
I
then.
nuked his water twice to knock it down to a trace, so he couldn't get the water pumps off of it.
Don't you? Oh, the water pumps off of it. Where is?
Yeah, he deleted them, of course.
Okay, he deleted them afterward and moved into something else because he's a scientific player. But yeah.
Having slant drilling was huge. I guess it was an auction. I don't even remember it.
He must have thrown a patent lab down and just taken it. I've been so busy. There's so many things happening around this map. I can't catch all of them, but it was still a good move on his part.
That's a great move on his part. Oh, Cubit dropped, I guess.
Yeah, Cubit dropped, which is going to make the game a lot easier for Game Slayer because Cubit had so much of his stock secured. Cubit might have actually been a threat, but I don't know. Moving into Offworlds, so I guess I'm going to mute you for a moment while I yell at the stream about what Offworlds are, just so everybody is aware. So. The Offworld market is a nice kind of in-game building. It provides a large amount of cash occasionally. Like once a minute, the Offworld market can launch, and it's going to use prices on Earth instead of prices on Mars. So we can see the Offworld prices off to the left-hand side. If we scroll over the tooltips, water is worth about $247 Offworld. Food, $253. We can go so on and from there and see that oxygen is worth about $483 off-world. It's very expensive on-world, but if you can manage to buy up 100 oxygen or get to 100 oxygen in some way, then you can ship that over to Earth and make a nice profit from it there. We can also see that chems are about 367. Might be very worthwhile to be sending chems right now, because that's just a $300 boost on the 100 stack of chems that you send per launch. Very, very nice building to have up right now and established for our computer Cubit. We'll have to see if he can actually manage to get something done from there. Also, we see that PB Head finally managed to finish his buyout on Hexmage. So now we've got 2 beasts in this game with Game Slayer and PB. They will likely be competing to knock out these other 2 players and then compete against each other for the end of the game. However, both of them are likely going to be targeting down our AI because of the stock that the AI player has in Game Slayer. If one of them can take out this AI, they'll secure the rest of this 4 stock. And for PB, that would be a great step toward actually finishing Game Slayer off later. For Game Slayer, it's a great step towards securing himself and making sure that that Cubit can't finish him off. And also making sure that PB can't get those stocks from Cubit. Alright. I'm back if you have anything you want to talk about from that game.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I'm just watching the AI play. I've taken a lot of the brakes off the AI, so they'll swap their buildings around a lot more, and it looks like they've fully swapped into electronics.
Cubit actually had all those electronics established himself early, so...
Yeah, okay, so he's stuck.
So the AI is just kind of stuck on them. Maybe it even added electronics. The electronics were upgraded for it, and it does have carbon scrubbing, which I don't know, that might push it that way.
Well, it's hard to judge the AI based off of taking over a human because, you know, all their decisions are kind of based off the assumption that they've...
Right. Well, the very first thing the AI did when it took over was throw down 2 Offworlds immediately. So...
Are Offworld prices good this game?
The oxygen's okay. Everything else is kind of trash.
Yeah.
So...
It's not actually factoring that in yet.
Gotcha.
It's a hard thing to determine. Yeah, it looks like the offer prices are not awesome. And considering it's not making anything well to be sold off world.
I mean, chems are the best thing to send right now, but I don't think anybody's identified that, and they're all going oxygen anyway. So at least, you know, it's probably on par with the other players.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's sending oxygen and just auto-sending it. People ask why I don't auto-send in my games. That's why.
Is the AI at least sending chems? Because it'll at least do the math.
Look at all the money.
Hold on, let me check. Yeah, the AI is sending chems.
All right. Good job, AI.
Let's check Lely. Lely's sending oxygen too.
Wow, this is definitely turned into an off-world game here. Wow.
Oh, for sure.
It's going to be an interesting match between PB Head and Gameslayer at this point. The question, I guess,
definitely. It's who gets the AI.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to at this stage. I don't know who's closest. It looks like PB Head is way closer to the AI, so I imagine PB is going to take it. Because what PB did was just go heavy engineering labs.
Yeah. I mean, I would think PB Head should buy Swilly or whatever that is, because there's only one share. Only one share goes to Gameslayer, which is not a big deal.
Well, yeah, but if he gets to Qubit, he gets 4 shares in Gameslayer.
Oh, right.
And that game's over at that point.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, like, he's got it. And he gets the Qubit buy.
Okay.
So that's pretty fantastic for PB. And I think PB is going to have the game locked up. We'll have to see if Gameslayer can manage to fight back at all. Gameslayer almost has to go for the... Well, I mean, Gameslayer's just in a lot of trouble at this point. He needed that Qubit buy.
Yeah.
But I think PB made a really good play with his engineering labs. Those are way more valuable on this patch. Like, way more valuable. And he did a good job just sitting in his corner. And I don't know if you noticed, PB has like 16 techs already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like people have definitely moved toward engineering. It's interesting. People that kind of stayed away. It hasn't changed, really.
No, it did change with this patch. Are you kidding? There's a huge shift. Prices are higher this patch.
Oh, well, yeah, they start higher.
And so they start higher, but that kind of also...
But the demand curve is the same.
The demand curve is the same, but they start so much higher that it still kind of impacts things, and prices also tend to kind of shoot higher at this point. It takes a little longer for everything to come down to nothing, and so that makes the engineering lab way more valuable on average, just in these games so far.
I mean, it's good. I mean, in general, if there's one sort of building I feel like everyone should build in general, it is the engineering lab, because it's just a way of tweaking your production.
Exactly.
I mean, everyone should be able to make use of the engineering lab.
Yeah.
It's just that, of course, it's a claim. So,
or 2
so I guess,
in PB's case, but yeah.
Yeah. So is Gameslayer hoping he can? Well, he only needs to get to
Gameslayer doesn't. Billion. I mean, there's no way. PB's already 2/3 of the way to buying Gameslayer. Gameslayer's only halfway to PB, so PB's gonna wrap it up pretty easily here at this point. Yeah. But that's okay, because now we don't have to focus on the game as much, and we can talk about other things if we want to. I do love how PB is now going for the 4 times water at this point. He hasn't necessarily made the best use of his engineering labs, but it doesn't... I mean, they're still managing to make him decent money, so... And they made him money when it counted. I still find it hilarious that he has 4 times upgraded electronics with carbon at $6, and he can still only make $35 a second off of them. Oh, the computer's actually been shifting around its production quite... Oh, no, this is PB now. What am I talking about? PB has all this. No wonder the computer's making good moves. It's a player.
I mean, I would, you know, for players at your level, it's not going to be too interesting, but I definitely would like to know what, you know, how people are still learning the game feel about the AI, because I put a lot of effort into it with this patch. So...
Look at all the money.
Well, yeah. So this is always a problem with the 6-player game. I don't really know how to solve this. I always hate the situation
where the game is over, but it hasn't ended yet. Yeah, that's why I play 4-man.
I mean, I've pushed it as hard as I can so that, you know, if one of them had bought Swilly, they would have gotten. I mean, look at PB Head's stock price at this point.
Oh, I know, it's insane. Actually, that's something a lot of players have been talking about. I don't know how much you've been in on that. Is just the basic idea that maybe stock prices are a little too high now. Maybe we need some kind of reward, some kind of incentive to save a dying player. You know what I mean? So that one player just doesn't go super critical from the start of the game. Because you removed when you buy a player, players still get money from it, but they don't get the full cash that the other players having to pay, right? And so a lot of people just aren't even saving people at this point in the new patch from what I've seen. Or from what I've been heard. They won't throw that money that way.
Now, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing.
Okay.
Like, because I feel like you want the weaker players to get knocked out of the game as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily see that as a problem.
Gotcha.
Like, this is the situation I want to avoid, where it's 5-on-1.
Well, 5-on-1, yeah.
There's nothing good about that, right? In this case, Swilly kind of got stuck around because this talk was kind of split between a number of different players. So,
but you can maybe say that the reason it turned out this way, I mean, being 5-on-1, well, if Gameslayer just made some mistakes, that's why it turned out the way it did, right? And PB just straight up outplayed him. I think the only downside is the game was effectively over about 3 or 4 minutes ago. And then it took those last 3 or 4 minutes to actually clean it up.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, I got time for one more. If you want to do another one.
We could do one more. Yeah, sure. Why not? Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. I don't know why we'd be getting any pixelation from me right now, but I don't think I have anything else.
Do you want to do something crazy and try the reveal map option?
We can try the reveal map option. I think people were enjoying that from what I heard, but...
Yeah? Okay, cool.
I can go ahead and observe another one.